He wants to have his cake and eat it too. If, in fact, the charges had happened 3 years ago, he would have said there was no investigation, it's a rush to judgment. If they happened after a full investigation, he says, well, now it was time to work with the campaign. Look, running for president is his choice. No one else is making him do it. But it is not an excuse not for the justice system to continue to operate.
All right, former New Jersey governor and 2024 Republican presidential candidate Chris Christie commenting on Donald Trump's latest indictment. Meanwhile, in the latest Emerson College poll, Christie has surpassed Ron DeSantis with 9% supporting the former New Jersey governor. Support for the Florida governor is now in single digits at 8%. Meanwhile, in a presidential matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Biden leads Trump 48 to 41%, while Donald Trump appears to have a tight grasp on the majority of the Republican Party. At least one prominent GOP leader is attempting to battle what the former president has done to his party. For more on this, let's bring in senior political columnist for Politico, Jonathan Martin. His latest piece is entitled McConnell in Winter, Inside the GOP Leader's Attempt to Thwart Trump. And Jonathan, you write in part this: Mitch McConnell has made it his practice to dodge questions about Donald Trump, which is why it was so striking last month to sit in McConnell's Capitol office and have him repeatedly steer our conversation toward Trump. Of all the ways Trump has reshaped the Republican Party, it's clear that McConnell sees the drift toward isolationism as the most pernicious, particularly at a moment when the fate of Ukraine and perhaps even NATO countries could be determined by the resolve of the Republican Party. That's so interesting, this interview. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. Yeah, one of the things I've been really struck by this year that's sort of happening in plain view, but I don't think has been fully digested, is Mitch McConnell's attempt to keep the Republican Party supporting Ukraine, supporting NATO, and really supporting a kind of traditional Reaganite foreign policy, which, Mika, 20 years ago would not have even been an issue in the Republican Party. Of course, it was the party of the hawks, but obviously now that's in question because large part of what Trump has done to reshape the party and move it more towards isolationism. And McConnell is kind of the last of the Mohegans on a Reaganite foreign policy, at least among the big figures currently in the party. And so he has privately and publicly tried to steer his party, at least in the Senate, toward Ukraine, toward confronting Russia, and is trying to bring along the kind of next generation of Senate Republicans to keep them on that same Reaganite path. But obviously, with Trump leading the party and with a lot of Trump acolytes in the House, it's not going to be easy to keep getting money out of this Congress for Ukraine.
Jonathan, I think you spent time with McConnell before he had that incident at the press briefing where he froze for 20 seconds.
Yes.
But what did you make of his health, and what did the people you spoke to about him tell you about their concerns about his health?
Well, this is why this column, I think, was poignant, is because I started doing this piece a few months ago after he had the fall in March at a Washington hotel. And, every time I would talk to somebody about McConnell and about sort of this mission to keep the party where it's been on foreign policy, off the record or on background, they would say something like, have you seen McConnell recently? Have you talked to McConnell of late? And that would lend to a separate conversation about his health, about his condition. And so, yeah, I saw him in his office a week before he had that freeze up on camera. And he's noticeably declined, in part because of the after effects of that fall, in part because his hearing's gotten really bad. He can't nearly hear as much. And so this is why this moment's extraordinary. Here we are watching this counteroffensive in Ukraine, which is going to be so important to keep the money flowing from NATO and the West. And their greatest champion in the Republican Party is an increasingly frail state in his own life back here in America. Guys, I would add one more thing. There's a Democratic governor of Kentucky who would potentially appoint a McConnell successor if McConnell vacates that seat. while that governor is still in office. And so that just really adds to this moment.
And despite even the presence of that Democratic governor, among those wishing the best for Mitch McConnell's continued health and service, senior people around President Joe Biden, because they know how important he is to keeping the funding going to Ukraine. But Jamar, your story also makes a really important point here that you and I talked about yesterday. This contradiction. Yeah. McConnell has dedicated his career right now to being a bulwark between the Trump isolationism and the rest of the Republican Party. But he could have potentially avoided all of this had he cast his vote to convict Trump in the second impeachment trial and rally 10 more Republicans with them, something he probably could have done. Tell us about that moment of tension.
Well, it's what makes this moment, all the more rich is that, this is McConnell's way of confronting Trumpism, trying to keep the party away from isolationism. But it wouldn't nearly be the challenge if Trump was not still the de facto head of the party and the likely next nominee of the party. And the reason he is, in part, is because Mitch McConnell did not try to find 10 more senators beyond the 7 who voted to convict Trump of that second impeachment in February of 2021. If McConnell himself had voted to convict and then found 9 more Republican senators, no easy task, I give you that, this would not be nearly a factor because Trump would not be eligible to run for president again by the Constitution. And guys, that is one of history's great counterfactuals, the what if. What if McConnell tries to round up those extra senators? He needed 17, and there were 7 who voted to convict. Now, he didn't do it. The public claim was, well, you can't go after a president on impeachment who's already out of office. We also know it was because of politics. His caucus didn't want to go there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he didn't have the votes, and he was great at counting votes. And the last thing he could afford to do, a lot of people couldn't understand why he acted so strongly on January the 6th, why he spoke out so decisively against President Trump during the impeachment proceedings, but then voted against impeaching him. It just, he didn't have majority, and he couldn't run the minority moving forward had he done that. I want to ask you about, you talk about guys like me who are Republicans that raised in Reaganism and in the shadow of Reaganism, cold warriors, my whole family, cold warriors, so to speak, in their mind. Donald Trump's one thing. Tommy Tuberville is quite another. He is among these senators. We now have no Republican would have ever done this when I was in Congress. I mean, I was on the Armed Services Committee, where I'm from, Northwest Florida. And 5, 6 military bases. Those people, anytime, those admirals, generals, colonels, anytime we mixed abortion with readiness or social issues with readiness, man, they would dress us down in a second and say, keep it to military readiness. I'm just curious. These Republican senators have to be horrified. Tuberville going on TV sounds like, a spokesperson for Vladimir Putin. Ukraine can't win.
Imagine if Shelby was still in office next to him, and imagine what Shelby is saying right now, the former senior senator from Alabama, Joe. Look, it's pure tribalism. The fact is that he's a Republican doing it, and there's not going to be folks speaking out, against him because he's in the same tribe, and that's where we are. It is dramatically different than it was, Joe, when you were in Congress, but that's where we are right now. And it's all the more remarkable that McConnell, I think, is fighting this fight against Trump on isolationism because obviously it's the opposite of where the party is going.
Politico's Jonathan Martin, thank you very much. And that does it for us for now. Stay tuned to MSNBC all day for continuing coverage of the 4th indictment of former President Donald Trump. Anna